Hi, it's Therese from Lost in Paper, and I'm back again as creative guest for WOW Embossing Powder, and I've got another 2 cards to share with you. And I've had a lot of fun with the embossing powder this time and using the letter T. But before we get to that, I'm going to create a stencil background. I've got some paste and I didn't want this to be too even. So what I did here was actually just splotch it over a dotted stencil and then scrape it flat. And while the embossing paste is still wet, I'm going to add some glitter embossing powder, and this is a really pretty one. It's called Coconut Ice. Now I'm not going to heat set this right now because it will make the embossing paste puff up, so I'm going to set that aside to dry. So while that's drying, I'm going to work on the focal point for my first card design. I've temporarily adhered a die cut Mega T, and it's cut from 110 pound Nina cardstock just onto a scrap piece of cardstock. Just gives me something to hold onto it while I'm embossing, and I'm going to do lots of embossing here. I've added some embossing ink, and this is the clear ultra slow drying ink from WOW, directly to the T. And then I've used, this is a really bright pink opaque embossing powder, and it's called Fluorescent Tickled Pink. How cool is this colour? Anyway, to make this look amazing, I have added a couple of layers over top. So I've come back in, added the embossing powder a couple of times, and I thought it'd be fun to add some glitter. So I've got some distress glitter here, and I thought I'd try it this way first. Didn't work very well. I actually shook almost the whole lot off, so I had to start again. And my embossing powder's still dry here, so then I've added the glitter again and heat embossing it. And this is on speed 2 with my WOW dual heat embossing tool. And there's not a lot of glitter showing, not enough for me. So while it's still wet, I'm trying to quickly add a little bit more of the distress glitter here. And this does work better. I was thinking initially I'm just going to add it to the top of the letter T, but it can barely see that. It can see it, but it wasn't enough. So I'm going again. This time I've got this is a coffee filter, and I'm mixing the embossing powder directly with the distress glitter. And I've got to say, this works so much better. So here I go again. I've added some more embossing ink directly to the top of the T, and then I'm adding the actual embossing powder. I didn't want to tap it off too much, and this time I'm not going to hit it from the top. I'm actually going to melt the embossing powder from beneath. It does take a little bit longer. I've got a stack of layers happening on this letter T now. It's really going to be a statement on this card. And you can see already that looks much better. So much better, in fact, that I did the whole letter. I just couldn't have the top of it now. I had to actually make the whole letter glittery. So I just flipped my T around, temporarily adhered it to the same piece of cardstock, and there you go. You can really see that glitter now. Anyway, while I was mucking around with that, my embossing paste is now dry, so I can just hit this. I have got this on the highest speed, so speed 2 again, and just melting that coconut ice embossing powder on top of the embossing paste. And I don't know if you can see the glitter there, but you can certainly see it in real life. So this is a girly card, and I thought it'd be fun to add some flowers, and I'm going to be doing some forgot what they're called, Zig Real Clean Colour Brush Markery things. I haven't used these things in an age, but so I thought I'd get them out and play with them today. And I've used the Opaque, it's the white superfine, bright white superfine embossing powder, and this is on the Bristol Smooth cardstock because I know these pens are finicky. and if I tried to colour with them on any other kind of cardstock, it does my head in. So I'm using the Bristol because I know that it will tolerate these really well. Okay, I'm using the direct to paper technique here, and I'm actually using 2 different colour markers at a time and just using them to blend out the colour, basing the darker colour near the centre of the flower and then just using the lighter colour to blend that out. So this is the Grateful Heart stamp set from Altenew, and this is pretty much like a emboss resist technique. I'm just painting directly over the centres of the flower, and that embossed area is going to almost reject the watercolour, and I can just pat any excess away off the embossed areas, and it's going to look like I've coloured right between the lines. I actually stamped and coloured this flower image 3 times, and I'm only going to share the one with you, and I used the coordinating die to cut them out. So my sentiment here, I thought I'd do in an ombre sort of style, so really easy to do with a stamp positioning tool. I simply just used my lighter colour on the top of the sentiment and then stamped it out, and then only added the ink to the bottom portion of the sentiment, stamped that down, and I wanted this to look a little bit embossed. So now I've got the embossing ink, and of course I waited for it to dry first. I've got the embossing ink, re-stamped that over top, and then I'm adding the clear matte dull embossing powder, and that just gives it this sort of raised look, and it just takes your sentiment to the next level. And I think it looks really pretty in those 2 colours together. Now I'm just going to put my card together, and I have added the panel directly to the front of a top fold card. I did use lots of adhesive here because it had warped just a little bit, and I'm using a nice strong liquid adhesive to add all of my flowers over top of the embossed paste with the glitter embossing powder on it, because I knew I wanted it to hold. And I did actually set this aside for a few minutes to make sure that those flowers had adhered before I worked on the rest of the card. I didn't want them shifting around, and I sort of laid them out around I kind of worked out where my letter T was going to be just by holding it above the flowers. I decided to pop this up with some foam squares today, because I know these have a real strong adhesive, these particular ones, but you could actually layer it up and with a few layers of die cut tea and create your own solid element. I just wanted that little underneath look, how you can sort of see around the edge of something with the tea, and then I did the same popping up my sentiment. Added a couple of jewels, and my first card is done. You can really see that glitter now. You couldn't the first way that I did it. The second way, much better. So I've got another emboss resist technique. This one's much easier to do. I've got a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock. It's cut the same size as the front of my card, and I've added some clean water to the front, and now I'm just picking up this is liquid watercolor. It's actually the watercolor refills for the brush markers from Altenew, and I'm just using it as a paint. So you could use anything, any paints that you have, any watercolors that you have, to sort of recreate this technique. And I've chosen 2 colors that are going to be fairly light colors in my whole mix today. I'm using my dual heat tool again. I'm really surprising myself at exactly how much I use this tool. I have used it on setting 1 so much more than I ever thought I would, just to speed things along. So it doesn't get anywhere near as hot, it doesn't blow anywhere near as much air, so it actually dries your work beautifully. I've got the same letter, this Mega T, and I've die cut it from some stamp masking paper this time, and used the T to position on the front of my card, and then put the negative space, created the negative space by adhering it down. And then I could actually add that embossing ink just where the letter T was going to be. And before I added the embossing paste, I had to take away that extra stamp masking paper around the edge. I bet you can't guess which colour, which non-colour embossing base I'm using here. I'm using this all the time. So this is the Clear Matte Dull, yet again. It just has such a unique look and makes me happy. But it will look just as amazing if you used it with a gloss finish to give that emboss resist look. And now I did wait for that embossing to cool down before I added some more colours around the edge. So I want that tea to pop now, and I've come in with the same two colours again and added those, added more water, and then I'm also adding a couple of darker colours here. And I still couldn't see the letter enough to make me happy. So what I've done now is actually got the watercolour refills, and I did actually come in and drop them directly onto my cardstock, and I'm getting much happier with this now. And I didn't dry this section in between. I actually added all of my colours here before I dried it. And this is not watercolour cardstock, this is actually Bristol Smooth, and I can't believe how well it's tolerating all this water. I didn't have any problems with pilling or anything, but I did have too much water on this. So I just have a paper towel here and I dabbed up a little bit of that, and then it actually dried much quicker. And you can see it's quite warped, but I just actually ran this piece through my die cutting machine without any dies to flatten it out. And I also set it under some books, and that kind of fixed all of that. I wanted some splatters, so I've actually covered my tea just temporarily with the negative, it's not negative, with the positive portion of my die cut. Splattered some black, I think it was, and some blue, that's right. And for the sentiment, I've used another sentiment from the Crystal Frame set, and I did exactly the same thing. I did actually heat emboss that with the Clear Matte Dull over top as well. And then I just added some jewels, which I actually did to the other card as well. I hope you've been inspired to get out your WELL products and have some fun. Till next time, happy paper crafting. Bye.